Sunday.
Welcome to the Capitol.
The White House says sequestration will have a severe effect on many Americans. House Republicans agree, but they say the answer is to find other spending cuts, not tax hikes.
Well, I think that sequestration is a bad idea all around. It should be something that is out of the question. The fact is we've had plenty of spending cuts, $1.6 trillion in the Budget Control Act. What we need is growth. We need growth with jobs. And if you have spending cuts, the education of our children and other investments like the National Institutes of Health, where you are hindering growth, you're not going to reduce the deficit. So what we do need is more revenue and more cuts. What I would like to see that is in a big, balanced, bold proposal. Short of that, we must do something to avoid the sequester.
But here's what House Speaker Boehner said this week.
At some point, Washington has to deal with its spending problem. Now, I've watched them kick this can down the road for 22 years that I've been here. I've had enough of it. It's time to act.
Congresswoman, let's look at the numbers. Are you really saying that in a government that spends $3.5 trillion a year, that increased federal discretionary spending by 14% over the last 4 years, you can't find $85 billion to cut to avoid the sequester?
Well, we have made the cut in terms of agriculture subsidies. There are tens of billions of dollars in cuts there, and that should be balanced with eliminating subsidies for big oil. Why should we lower Pell Grants instead of eliminating the subsidies for big oil?
But why not just cut spending? $85 billion in a $3.5 trillion government.
Well, let's just back up from, with all due respect to the Speaker, that what he said is not the gospel truth. The fact is that a lot of the spending increases came during the Bush administration, 2 unpaid-for wars that we got ourselves engaged in, a prescription drug plan that added enormous amounts to our spending, and the tax cuts for the high end that did not create jobs and create revenue coming in.
But
so
the
that's
total
how we
debt
got to
has
a place.
increased $5 trillion since this president came in.
Well, part of that is from what we had to do to avoid going over the cliff of a recession, a depression. Yes, we had the Recovery Act, which saved or created 3.5 million jobs. You know, the record of job growth in the private sector has been consistent for many record number of months. So again, we have to make a judgment about how do we get growth with jobs? That's where the real revenue comes from. You don't get it by cutting down your seed corn, cutting in education, cutting back on investments in science and National Institutes of Health, food safety, you name it. So it isn't as much a spending problem as it is a priorities. And that's what a budget is, setting priorities.
But you talk about growth. Even Christina Romer, the former head of the Council of Economic Advisors for the president, says you increase taxes, that also hurts growth.
Well, it's about timing. It's about timing, and it's about timing as to when you make cuts as well. The fiscal cliff, you raised taxes $650 billion right away. Yeah, and that was a very good thing to do on people making over the high end in our population. So here's the thing, though. We are here to have a budget that has revenue coming in, that has investments made into the future. We also want to make decisions in those two areas where growth with jobs are created, because more jobs, more revenue coming in. Nothing brings more money to the Treasury of the United States than investment in education of the American people. So we have to recognize that. Which cuts really help us and which cuts hurt our future. And cuts in education, scientific research, and the rest are harmful, and they are what are affected by the sequestration. So it is almost a false argument to say we have a spending problem. We have a budget deficit problem that we have to address. Right now, we have low interest on the national debt, and it's a good time for us to act to lower that deficit. We think the deficit and the national debt are at immoral levels. We think they must be reduced. We're sick and tired of paying interest on the national debt, and that's 15%. That's a large percentage of the budget, the interest on the national debt. It's lower now because of the lower interest rates.
But again, all I would say is we got a $3.5 trillion budget, and they're talking about $85 billion in cuts. Let's go to the taxes, though.
Okay, but before you leave spending, we agreed to $1.6 trillion in spending and discretionary domestic spending.
But the sequestration is just spending cuts.
Right. And secondly, we have gone to Medicare and had savings of over $1 trillion in Medicare already. When I say we, I mean the Democrats. And what the Republicans' budgets are proposing is to make a voucher of Medicare, no longer make it a guarantee. There are other things in this discussion that I think the American people have made fully
aware of. We're going to touch on them.
Understand what it means in their daily lives.
Let's talk about taxes. You keep talking about raising taxes. You talk about making the wealthy. Let me just ask the question first.
Yeah.
But let me ask a question. You keep talking about making the wealthy pay their fair share of taxes. The top 1%.
Right.
Top 1% pay 37% of all federal income taxes. The top 5% pay 59% of all federal taxes. If you took the total income of everyone making more than $1 million a year, if you taxed it all at 100%, that's only $726 billion, which is less than the projected deficit for this year. I mean, the bottom line, Congresswoman, is you can't raise taxes enough to solve the deficit problem.
Nobody is saying that. We're saying it has to be balanced. Now, on the subject of the high end, we're not talking about raising rates. We did that. We eliminated the high-end tax cuts of the Bush years, which only increased the deficit and didn't create jobs. We kept the middle-income tax cuts. What we have in our proposal that Congressman Van Hollen has put forth, our top Democrat on the Budget Committee, is to say that we're going to eliminate subsidies on big oil. That gives us a lot of money, eliminating the subsidies for big oil. We also have the Buffett rule, which says all of these high-income people would pay a minimum. They would have to.
So you're raising taxes on the wealthy?
No, you're not raising. You're saying that they should pay their fair share, which is 30%, which is even lower than the 39.6, which is the rate, the bracket they're in.
But you're saying that if they have a deduction from a home mortgage,
they can only take advantage of so many loopholes.
Well, there are deductions that are on the books. The point is
30%.
that.
Yeah.
The point is that you can't raise enough money. I mean, the main driver of the debt is entitlements. 60% of our budget, of our spending, is on entitlements. When Medicare started, life expectancy was 70. It's now 79. Don't you have to raise the eligibility age and slow the growth of benefits? Isn't that the way to deal with the deficit?
Okay, I'm glad you brought up Medicare, because don't you think you should, to use your question, don't you think you ought to see if raising the age really does save money? Those people are not going to evaporate from the face of the earth for 2 years. They're going to have medical needs, and they're going to have to be attended to. And the earlier intervention for it, the less the cost will be and the better the quality of life. I do think we should subject every federal dollar that is spent to the harshest scrutiny. And I do think that the challenge in Medicare is not Medicare. The challenge is rising medical health care costs in general, and prescription drugs and the rest of that drive those costs. So that's what we have to address, which we did in the Affordable Care Act, and we're about to receive some reports from the Institute of Medicine about how we reduce the cost of health care in Medicare, because we're paying for quality, not quantity of procedures, but quality of performance. And I think that there is money to be saved there. And I don't think it has to come out of benefits for beneficiaries, and I don't think you have to raise the age.
Gun control will be a big part of the president's agenda in the State of the Union address Tuesday night. But I want to ask you about another part of the effort to stop these horrible, repeated acts of mass violence. As part of your plan, you call for more scientific research on the connection between popular culture and violence. We don't need another study, respectfully. I mean, we know that these video games where people have their heads splattered, these movies, these TV shows, why don't you go to your friends in Hollywood and challenge them, shame them, and say, knock it off?
Well, I do think whatever we do, because when you talk about evidence-based, we have that throughout our proposal. In other words, we don't want to just be anecdotally writing bills. We want to have the evidence to say this.
Well, I'm not sure you want to write bills anyway, but don't you, I mean, you have a lot of friends in Hollywood. Why don't you go to them and publicly say, I challenge you to stop the video games?
But I do think, see, I understand what you're saying. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother. But they tell, not Hollywood, but the evidence says that in Japan, for example, they have the most violent games in the rest and the lowest mortality from guns. I don't know what the explanation is for that, except they might have good gun laws. But I think that you took one piece of it. We're talking about no further sales of assault weapons. What is the justification for an assault weapon? No further sales of those. No further sales of the increased capacity, 30 rounds in a gun. We're talking about background checks, which is very popular even among gun owners and hunters. We avow the First Amendment. We stand with that and say that people have a right to have a gun to protect themselves in their homes, in their jobs, wherever, and that they in their workplace, and that they, for recreation, for hunting and the rest. So we're not questioning their right to do that.
The question is that I think a lot of people say, here it is, liberals like Nancy Pelosi want to go after gun owners. But when it comes to mental health laws, when it comes to their liberal friends in Hollywood, they don't want to make them anti-op.
Well, mental health laws, I have to tell you, when I was Speaker, and we couldn't even get a hearing on this before that, we passed the Mental Health Parity Act, and then in the Affordable Care Act, we took that to the next step, and in another year, we'll have many more services available because of mental health parity. We certainly have to do more, and I salute and applaud all of those who are saying we have to do more in mental health. But I think we have to do it. I think we have to do it all, and that's why we said we included in there we have to take a look at what these games are. I don't think we should do anything anecdotally. We have a saying here: the plural of anecdote is not data. And so we want to know, what is the evidence? What will really make a difference here? And I think it has to be comprehensive.
Finally, President Obama predicted this week that you will once again be Speaker, his words, pretty soon. What do you think are the chances of you regaining the majority in the House and you once again being Speaker Pelosi after the 2014 midterms?
Well, it isn't. That's nice that he said that, but the fact is, what is important is that the Democrats regain the majority in the House. Between now and then, we have a lot of work to do. We want to pass comprehensive immigration reform. We want to keep our kids safe and pass some initiatives that relate to gun violence prevention. We want to create jobs and have initiatives for growth with jobs. We want to make our country more democratic in terms of how elections are conducted, reducing the role of money, increasing the level of civility so that more women and young people participate. It's about confidence in our democracy, confidence in our children's safety, confidence in our economy, confidence as to who we are as a people. So we have plenty to do before then. What the president said was complimentary, but as far as I'm concerned, it's just about the issues, and the issues are better served by a Democratic majority, in my view, and that's what I'm hoping that we will achieve in 2014. But as I say, we have a lot of work to do, hopefully in a bipartisan way between now and then. And I think that in the issues that I named, we could get bipartisan collaboration.
Congresswoman Pelosi, thank you.